Okay, my belated reaction to the David Haye Tony Bellew weigh-in and my final thoughts before the fight. David Haye weighed in at 224 pounds. That's 16 stone bang on. I think there was maybe 8 ounces on that as well, but for all intents and purposes, it's 16 stone, 224 pounds. And Tony Bellew weighed in at 213 pounds, which in English money is 15 stone, 3 pounds. So David Haye quite a bit heavier than Tony Bellew, as to be expected. A lot of people are kind of making fun of Bellew's condition, the shape that he looked in. I didn't think he looked too bad. By his standards, he looked pretty similar to how he looks in his cruiserweight fights. He's never going to be a body beautiful type. He wasn't a body beautiful light heavyweight when he didn't have all that extra weight on him. So I've said this many times, it all comes down to genetics, or a lot of it comes down to genetics. Tony Bellew, unless he did absolutely incredible amounts of weight training and really not any type of training that's suitable for boxing, if he did incredible amounts of weight training, took all types of different supplements, had a ridiculous diet that again probably wouldn't be suitable for boxing, unless he did all that, then he would never be able to have a physique like David Haye. David Haye has the physique that he has largely down to genetics. Yes, hard training and dieting, but you can put Tony Bellew and David Haye on the exact same diet and the exact same workout routine, and I guarantee you that Tony Bellew will not have the same physique as David Haye at the end of it. It really is genetics. So I wouldn't read too much into Bellew's physique. This is not a bodybuilding contest. Bellew seems in decent enough shape to me. I'm sure he can do the 12 rounds. He's done 12 rounds many times. Now, when I say he can do the 12 rounds, I mean, as long as he don't get knocked out in the meantime, I think he'll have the stamina to do the 12 rounds. As far as my final thoughts on how I think the fight is going to go or may potentially go, obviously I'm picking David Haye. Probably by knockout. Probably early. But I'm not as dismissive of the possibility of an upset as a lot of people seem to be. Because I do believe David Haye is a better fighter than Tony Bellew, more talented, hits harder, quicker, longer arms, so on and so forth. But I know what ring rust can do to a fighter. It's a real thing. So if there was an upset here, I would say, look, David Haye hasn't fought a live opponent for 5 years. So should we really be that shocked that he got upset by Tony Bellew? And here's one thing about Bellew. He's going into this fight knowing that it's extremely dangerous in the early rounds, particularly. You can watch many big punchers, sometimes early on in their careers, going in against journeymen who only have the intention of surviving. They have no intention of actually punching back. They just want to survive. And when a very experienced journeyman just wants to survive, it can actually be frustrating for that puncher because they're throwing everything at this journeyman, but he's so negative they can't catch him clean. He's moving away, he's blocking everything, and they are left, like I say, frustrated. Now, Tony Bellew was not a journeyman. He's a world-class fighter. He's a current world champion at cruiserweight. If he decides that he don't want to get hit by anything big in the first few rounds, I'm telling you, don't be surprised if he can actually do that. Again, journeymen, because they are habitual losers and they learn how to survive in the ring, a lot of them may actually have better survival skills than a lot of world level fighters because they don't find themselves in trouble as much as journeymen do. But still, if Tony Bellew sets his mind on surviving, particularly the early part of the fight, don't be surprised if he can actually do that. And once he survives the early part of the fight, he'll be looking to edge his way forward and start catching David Haye. So yeah, an upset would not be monumental in my mind for a guy who hasn't fought a live opponent in 5 years. That wouldn't be shocking to me. And from a technical point of view, I've seen David Haye throw a lot more left hooks. now that he's with Shane McGuigan than he did previously under Adam Booth. And his left hook is very powerful, by the way, fast, but it's a lot wider than Tony Bellew's left hook. Tony Bellew is a more natural left hooker. David Haye has had to develop this punch quite late on in his career. He's always had a left hook. I mean, he knocked Derek Chisora out with, it wasn't really a left hook actually, it was like a straight left thrown from almost a southpaw stance. When it comes to an actual true hook, David Haye's never really been a guy that throws that many left hooks or is that effective with a left hook. I know he rocked Bellew with a hook and, you know, a few other guys out there, but he's primarily a right-hand puncher. You know, he's not really known for a big left hook. So he's been developing that under Shane McGuigan and throwing it a lot more. There's an old adage in boxing, never throw a left hook with a left hooker. Because the guy who is the left hooker, the guy who's made his career out of throwing left hooks, will usually have the tighter hook, who'll usually have the better technique, who'll usually have the better timing with it. Because he's been trading on that left hook his whole career. That's his bread and butter. And Tony Bellew is, I'm telling you now, a much more natural left hooker than David Haye. So if David Haye gets overly ambitious and starts trying to trade left hooks, again, if Tony Bellew was to pull off the upset, that could be one of the ways the upset could unfold if they're exchanging left hooks and Tony Bellew gets the better of it. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But, you know, it's going to be interesting. It could be over in a couple of rounds with David Haye scoring the victory, as most people expect. And that's what I'm suspecting is going to happen as well. But, you know, if Tony Bellew has got a lot of experience and if he wants to survive the first few rounds and he sets his mind on it, I don't see why he shouldn't be able to do it. You know, or at least have a good chance of doing it. You know? Because David Haye, in terms of offense, yeah, he's gifted offensively, but he's not a pressure fighter, is he? David Haye's not a guy who's going to come forward and cut the ring off and break you down. That's not David Haye. David Haye likes to stand in the middle of the ring, maybe gradually edge forward, look for opportunities to throw his big bombs. But, you know, he's not going to put immense pressure on you coming forward. So if Tony Bellew does want to go for a walk around and see what the lay of the land is like, he might be able to do that and get away with it for quite a few rounds. So we'll see what the tactics are like from both men. Again, I have to reiterate before I close out this video that I don't think David Haye is feeling any pressure at all. And that actually might be a bad thing, because there is the possibility that he has underestimated Tony Bellew. There is the possibility that he hasn't mentally prepared himself for a tough fight. And if he hasn't mentally prepared himself for a tough fight, and the fight does get tough, it can be a shock to his system. It can be a shock to him psychologically, and he could unravel potentially. But when you're going into the ring expecting to have to go through hell, then when you actually have to go through hell, it's not a shock. You're prepared for that. You mentally readied yourself for that before you got in the ring, and therefore you're more willing and able to battle through it. So all the indications that I've seen of David Haye is that he truly believes this is an absolute gimme, an easy fight, a walk in the park. And he's already saying to IFL and various other media outlets, look, when this fight ends up being the mismatch I told you it was going to be, don't blame me, because it was Tony Bellew who requested this fight in the first place. He called me out and I said, okay, if the fans want to see it, I'll do it. I'll knock Tony Bellew out. Give me some easy money. This seems to be David Haye's attitude towards this fight. And I truly believe that that's what he's thinking, that this is an absolute, it's just like taking candy from a baby. That's David Haye's demeanor. You know, as far as him getting upset when he was in Liverpool at the press conference, well, he wasn't really upset with Tony Bellew. He was upset with the Liverpool fans hurling abuse at him, particularly about his ex-wife, because David Haye obviously had a well-publicized split with his wife, his now ex-wife. And that's really personal stuff. So he shouted back at them. He said, "Your mom," and this, that, and the other. I mean, you know, they were getting really personal. So David Haye's not used to being in that position. And this is not like when he was in Germany fighting Klitschko and he's walking through the crowd and you can't even hear really too much of what people are saying because you're in fight mode and there's a lot of noise anyway, so it's hard to pick out individual voices a lot of the time. It's just a big wall of noise. Whereas the press conference in Liverpool was a lot more intimate. So he could hear all the individual, or a lot of the individual comments that were being made and the abuse. And, you know, he had to sit there. He wasn't walking to the ring anyway. He had to sit there while they were all hurling this abuse at him and talking about his marriage and his wife and all this kind of stuff. Really personal kind of things. And there won't be many men, particularly not fighting men, who are going to sit there when somebody starts talking about their wife or their ex-wife, their family, and say nothing back. So he said what he said back. I don't think he was rattled at all. I think, as I say, he believes this is going to be an easy fight. And most of you guys, I'm sure, believe this is going to be an easy fight for David Haye. But if any of you, like me, believe that the upset here wouldn't be a massive shock, again, not because David Haye's not a better fighter than Tony Bellew, I believe he is, but because of the inactivity of David Haye. Never underestimate what inactivity can do to a fighter. And he's had these 2 recent fights, but they were such poor quality opposition and the fights were so short, you know. One thing as well, I should have closed this video out by now, but one thing as well is that David Haye seems to be a lot more stationary now in his comeback than he used to be. That foot speed don't seem to be there anymore. And foot speed generally with fighters tends to go before hand speed as they age. Usually the reflexes go first, then the foot speed, then the hand speed, and then the old adage goes, as the old adage goes, power is the last thing a fighter loses. It can differ from fighter to fighter, but generally that's how it is. Foot speed is usually one of the first things to go when a fighter starts getting old. And David Haye really relied quite a lot on his foot speed to keep fighters at distance, to get in and out when landing his shots, you know, to strike from distance. So, you know, you have to bear that in mind as well. And I also believe he's changed his stance from the Adam Booth stance. He's now a little more square on in the shoulders, and he's looking for the left hook more. His feet are still fairly wide apart most of the time, but when I notice him on the pads with Shane McGuigan, his feet are actually closer together than they were with Adam Booth. So he has changed his stance a little bit. Will he be easier to hit in that stance with the slower feet? It's going to be interesting. That's all I'll say. So drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your reaction was. Let me know your predictions and your breakdowns. All right, it's happening. I'm out.